Hi, my name is Ethanol, and today I'll be talking about Twitter Influencer Mapper, which is my project for CS 6963 Digital Forensics course. In today's social media dominated digital world, it is extremely important for us to understand the data and derive relationships from them. This doesn't only have commercial value, but also for a lot of the digital forensic professionals, it allows them to understand relationships and influencers between people and important topics. This project will be concentrating on Twitter and will be using Python's Tweepy library to perform API calls, both streaming and REST API calls to Twitter. So without wasting any more time, I want to dive into how this program basically executes and operates. I have made all my development on a Ubuntu distro that is running in VMware. So what I will do right now is switch to my virtual machine. As you can see, on the right side I have the final project, and on the left side I have my terminal window as well as the directory which contains the required files for this program to execute. Just to go over those two files, one of them is called my first name and last name _ Twitter config, which the first piece is my Twitter screen name, and basically it contains, which I don't want to open right now since it has my consumer secret, access token, consumer key, and the access token secret. I wanted to open up a sample file which I've generated to give you the details behind what this file formatting looks like. If I open this file, you will see it will only contain 4 lines. And in order, they are the consumer key, consumer secret, access token, and access token secret. It is very, very important to make sure this file name matches your handle _Twitter _config. Otherwise, the program will throw out an error and it will stop execution. So in order to execute, what I have to do is I have to initiate the Python script with a -p argument. -p is purge, and it allows any previous executions output files, including the database tables, the necessary TCP flow outputs, and any other log files that the execution created. I intentionally put the switch during development because it allows me to do a fresh start each time I hit the program. So as soon as I execute this, it goes, just because it has the purge, it does a pre-cleanup where the DB table is removed, and in this case there were no log files, so there was nothing to remove, and a database table was created and a log directory was created for logging all the tweets that we have captured. At this point it asks me, what is your Twitter handle? I will enter my Twitter handle here, and in case it was entered wrong or in an incorrect one which doesn't match the Twitter config file in the directory, again it's going to break the code and give you that warning. And what it does is it reads that, parses this file, returns back all the secrets and keys, and basically does the authentication with Twitter. The next step in this case is basically asking you which handle I want to follow. There are different options. One is manual, A is for automated, and I is ignore. If I select manual, it asks me if there is a specific handle on Twitter I want to follow. If I say A, it's going to ask me to make sure there's a PCAP file in the same folder so that it can parse through that and make sure and find if there is any screen names available in that PCAP file and use that as my target handle. Or I can simply select I, which ignores any handles and moves to the next step. Just for the purpose of this exercise, what I will say is, let's do an automated one. So as soon as I hit A, it says, please place the PCAP file in the working folder and hit enter. As you can see, I do not have a PCAP file here. So what I will do is I will move my PCAP file right here, and I will hit enter. As you can see, it did a process where it went out and ran the TCP flow and extracted all the files, and by parsing through, it found this add Arjevik, which is the handle that it will be using for the rest of the program. Just a quick note, this PCAP file I found online, and this user is no longer an active Twitter user, so at this point, if I try to execute anything such as which keywords, let's say it's a very recent news, so let's call Ebola and hit enter, what it will say is handle to monitor could not be resolved. So as you can see, Arjevik wasn't resolved, so this program basically breaks. So just to go through the exercise, let's start the program again. As you can see, all the files have been cleared because of the -p. It creates the log file and it asks me for my handle. So I enter ethanol and I will say I don't want anything. I don't want to concentrate on a specific individual, so I hit ignore. And now it says, which keywords do you want to monitor? What I will say is I want to monitor Ebola, and I hit enter. As you can see, it gives you the note saying that it will be tracking Ebola, and it starts listening to keywords. Now what happens is it will start creating the log files. Anytime that it finds any tweet in the universe that has the word Ebola, it basically inserts it into this log file as well as a MySQL database. So now it's executing. And what I have also provided is the log file generation is hourly. So every hour it's going to close this file and start a new file with that hour's tweets. So at this point, it's still accumulating. As you can see, the file size is now increasing because more tweets coming in. You know, it's inserting into this log as well as the database. So at this point, I will pause the video and I'm going to let it run for about an hour, and I will come back and show what the data looks like and how the visualization on this data can be performed. Hi. So it has been about maybe 25 minutes, and I think we have accumulated enough tweets to move on to our next piece of the project, which is the visualization. So if we switch back to the VM and log in, as you can see, it's still, you know, listening for keywords and has been extracting them and pushing them into the database as well as the log files. As I have mentioned, just because it's 5:06 right now, it has created the next log file for the new hour, and it starts accumulating it right there. If you look at this, we have accumulated 19.6 megabytes worth of tweets, and now we're at 7.7 and still accumulating. So just to do the visualization piece, as I have mentioned, what we have done is instead of using SQLite 3 as we have done in the previous labs and assignments, I have decided to use MySQL. This is mainly due to allowing simultaneous access and being able to access the database from another remote host. So at this point, while it's still accumulating, I want to switch back to my Mac and start looking at the visualization. Here, I had many options. I could have done visualization in any statistical software and or any other visualization tool. I have entertained using R, but then I have decided to use Tableau, which is a very powerful tool for investigatory analysis and visualization. So I have created this TWB file, which is a Tableau data file. And if I open this up, you will see what the final visualization will look like. I'm still on the trial version, so So this is a workbook that I have created, and basically it's asking me for the database credentials, which is on 10.0.1.25, which is the VMware's IP address, and I have created a user called CS6963 in the MySQL database, as well as I have created a password. So if I click on it, what it will do, it's going to open up the Twitter influencer extractor. So right now this data is live. It's updating. So if I go back to the data, and if I say refresh the data source, what it will do, it's going to go back into the file, and you might have seen the numbers have updated. So it's going to keep on updating the information, and we will be presenting this in this dashboard. So here I show number of tweets, number of influencers, which means they are talking about the specific topic, Ebola, that we have selected, as well as how many of those tweets were retweets of the previous message. So at the top, it gives you aggregate numbers, and on the other tabs, other boxes right here, we show who are the top influencers. And it looks like AP, with 3.6 million followers, is at the top of our list. It has tweeted about Ebola only once, but just due to the large number of followers, it is up in the list. And here, what we have also do is in the tweets that we collect, there is a device, or basically the source information. We have done a little bit of cleaning on the text, and we have presented what are the top 10 devices that people are basically tweeting from. So we have the Twitter web client, Android, iPhone, which is about the same size, Twitter feed, BlackBerry, and etc. So this is a nice visualization right here to show the top devices. Now, if and only if a tweet has a geolocation encoded, what we do is we extract that information and visualize it on a map. So one interesting thing that I have found while working with this was, due to some legacy migration, Twitter coordinates that are provided is reversed. So in the tool itself, in Tableau, I had to reverse latitude to longitude and longitude to latitude in order to get accurate mapping. So what we can do is we can start zooming in to these dots and see at what points around the world people are tweeting about Ebola. And as you can see, there is a large population in Nigeria area that are tweeting, as well as other places around the world. So as you can see, this is a nice way of visualizing the frequency, the size of influencers and their geolocations. One thing to note is the circle size depends on the number of followers. So if you're a higher influencer, which means you have a lot of followers, your dot right here will be larger than the other ones. So as you can see, as I mentioned, this data is live and it's keep on updating. So if I go back to my data and if I say refresh, as you will see, the numbers are going to keep on updating, and these charts are going to dynamically recalculated and be presented. So how is this data useful, and what can we use this type of a application in our day-to-day lives, as well as during any kind of forensic investigation? There's a lot of surveillance aspects of this, as well as commercial value in terms of finding who is talking about your products, or who are the biggest influencers that are communicating and expanding your message, and maybe have a little bit more targeted and directed communication with them is definitely the obvious benefits of running this type of an application. But besides that, it's also, even though for exercise purposes we have selected a very recent and spoken keyword, which is Ebola, what we can also do is we can target specific individuals we wanted to start monitoring, as well as the keywords that we are interested in, and let this program run for a very long time and see what are the typical communications and who are retweeting the messages from these individuals or this individual are, which can help us understand the network as well as the relationship between these different nodes. So at this point, while this is still refreshing, and let me hit one more time to see if the data has accumulated some more, I want to go back to the VMware and talk a little bit about the code itself. So we are back at our VMware, and we are at the top of our code, and I will slowly go through this code and wanted to highlight a few of the interesting points that I wanted to highlight. So number one are the libraries. I mean, most of these libraries are default libraries that help carry out basic tasks like parsing, making sure I can detect patterns in the files. For example, I wanted to cycle through every single file in the TCP flow output to see if there's a screen name associated with it, and etc. But the most important ones here are the TWEP, the JSON, MySQL DB, and the sub process. There's a small piece of code right here because I have noticed while I'm running, I do a lot of database work where I say if the table doesn't exist, create a table, and in case the table existed, it was printing out a lot of warning messages, which kind of made the terminal window right here, the command line, a little too crowded. So I wanted to suppress any type of warnings that comes out of the SQL database. So here are the keywords. IAM is who you are, your handle. UR is the one that you're following. The key is basically a global variable where we will read in the consumer keys, and we are using UTF-8 encoding. So if we scroll down, what you will notice here is, first of all, we make sure the database exists. So this basically creates a MySQL connection, creates the cursor, and creates a database and starts using it if it doesn't exist. Encoding is just basically passing in a text, which converts that into a encoded text. Drop table is simply dropping the table. Create table, the same, with the fields that we are interested in. And as you know, there are a lot of metadata associated with each tweet, but I have found these to be the ones that I really need in order to carry out my tasks. So update table is basically we are passing in a data, and it's inserting that data into the tweet data table. So set handle is basically just setting up the global handle of who I am. Words and string. This was interesting because what happens is at this stage right here on number 3, we put Ebola. What we could have easily put multiple strings that are comma separated, and what we wanted to do is we wanted to start monitoring on all of them. Keep in mind, if you put a comma separated values there, what it will do is it's going to OR those, and it will return for either one of them. What you can do is, if the way Twitter handles the filters is, if you do not enter with comma separated, for example, Ebola and let's say WHO, World Health Organization, then it's going to, without a comma, with a space, the Twitter is going to handle it as an AND condition, and it's going to try to find both words within a tweet. So that was an interesting catch right there that we had to basically accommodate for. So this, what it does is it grabs that strings, put them in a list, and compares with the tweet to see if it exists in there. The target handle, very similar to the top function. It's basically sets your target handle. The purge data, what it does is it goes out and cleans up any old executions files, again including the database, where you can see we are doing a drop database table. It will delete all the log files and the directory, as well as the TCP flow out directory and all the files as a result of that. Extract tweet fields, we pass in the JSON data. We do a little bit of checking to see if the coordinates exist or if it's a retweeted tweet, so that way we can accommodate those, put them into a dictionary, and basically pass it into our database. Grab a keyword list. What this does is, for the step number 3, as you can see right here, if they're comma separated, it basically lowers all the characters and does basic text editing where it clears, it removes the white spaces before and after, and basically comma separates and creates a list out of them and assigns it to the global variable keyword. Extract credentials. This is going back to this file we talked about, etunneltwitter.config, or any other handles config file, and it reads in the file and assigns the keys appropriately. Find a screen name. This is a interesting one. What this does is this is the one that goes after TCP flow executes and creates a TCP flow out directory. It goes through every single file in that directory and looks for the screen name, and if it comes across a screen name, it cleans out the text and it basically extracts the actual screen name and returns it. If the PCAP file doesn't exist, it gives a system exit saying that the PCAP file cannot be found. The streamer class is what actually handles the streaming, and what it does is if the data is detected, it goes and creates a tweet that file variable, and then loads up the data coming into a variable called tweet and immediately inserts it into the log file, and this is where it's done. And again, it looks at the time, and if the time is now the new hour, it creates a new log file, and it extracts tweet fields, which means I don't want to use everything, but it's just select the ones that I'm really interested in, and I basically insert it into a table. And these are our error detection and the timeout functions in there. When we look at the main class, it starts with an argument parser to look at if there are any arguments passed in, and if -p is there, we say purge old, which goes back and basically deletes, as we have mentioned before, all the historic files within the directory to have a clean and fresh start. And as soon as it runs, it creates the database table, as well as make sure the log directory exists, and if it doesn't, it has to create this log directory for the code to work. And then it's going to ask you for your Twitter handle. This is this step right here, and as soon as it grabs the handle, it also goes back and grabs the credential file and basically does an authentication with Twitter and prints up a message saying that Twitter authentication is complete. This is the second step in our code, which basically asks you the handle that we are going to be following. There are a lot of conditions and checks here to make sure if we wanted a manual, automated, or ignore. And based on that output, we basically assign the right handle, the target handle, to the global variable t handle, like UR, which is done in this step right here. Identify the keywords. Again, very similar. This is step number 3. Based on what has been entered, it creates a keywords list. And one thing to keep in mind is in order for the program to execute, one, it needs to have a handle. It can have a handle and also a keyword, but if you omit both and you do not enter anything for both of them, the program will exit saying that there is nothing to follow. That way it's not going out there and trying to pull every single tweet with any kind of data in it. So that's kind of the checks that we perform. So you have to enter a handle, target handle to monitor, or the keyword to follow. And finally, this is the step where we, based on the handle that we have entered, which is the UR global variable, and the keywords that are entered, it's going to check if they are existed, and if they are, then it's going to basically execute the right path of execution and complete. And this is the main function, and it basically has a keyboard interrupt. So if we wanted to kill the program, only thing that we have to do is do a Control-C, and as you can see, the program exits. So at this time, before ending this video, I wanted to also mention that this project is going to also have a project document which will go into greater detail about some of the prerequisites as well as some of the configuration that was performed in order for the program to execute. And to go over those very briefly, one of them, and an important one, is making sure that we have created a developer account in Twitter, and basically have created an application within the Twitter tool, and that way we can get our secret keys and authentication tokens for the Tweepy to do the handshake with Twitter. Another important detail was making sure that MySQL configuration is working. By default, MySQL is only accessible via the local host. So in order for us or anyone to access the database from a remote host like I'm doing right here through my Mac, there needs to be some configuration changes that is required, and I have highlighted those details and the steps that I have taken in the final report, which can be found, and if you follow through that, you will find a lot of those useful information to make sure the code is basically executing and working. And one last step, so if we go back to the code, of course throughout the whole development there was a lot of searching, Googling, and a lot of the supplementary information that I came across to make this project work, and I tried to highlight every single one of them in the references section at the bottom of the code. So those are the references and some helpful code snippets that I had to, and I basically used throughout the code. So at this point, I want to end my video by thanking you for watching my project, and I'm hoping you find this as fun as I have, and can be reused for many purposes. Thank you very much.